Hello, this is Kurt, also known as the 1upkid, and I'm here with another ramble. And I will be talking about Dragon Ball Z Kai, the Buu arc. And I actually believe that there is a possibility that it has a 4:3 aspect ratio version. Now I want to give a quick summary before why I believe this is a possibility. The first half of Kai, which aired back in 2009 to 2011 in Japan, was comprised of episodes 1 through 98, which was the Saiyan to the Cell arc. And for television in Japan, it aired in 16:9, which is a widescreen aspect ratio. And for that, it was cropped. And the reason for that is since Dragon Ball Kai is just taking old footage, which was made back in the 80s and 90s, that footage was only made in 4:3 because widescreen for television did not exist at the time. And with that in mind, with the new standards in Japan, Fuji TV, the network where they aired Kai, states that any show that was considered a new show had to be in widescreen, had to be in 16:9. So they had to crop it because you can't take a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is a square, and make it into a rectangle. So they had two options. They could either stretch it out, make it look really weird, or they can zoom in, thus causing cropping because losing the tops and the bottoms of the image. Interestingly enough, when it came out for home video in Japan, the Blu-rays were in 4:3, while the DVDs were still in 16:9 as their television version was. I believe they did this because at the time, this was a new thing, so I think they were always planning on making it in 4:3, but when they found out they had to do it in 16:9, they had to change the version. But the overall point was the 4:3 version, one with no cropping at all, existed in Japan. So as Kai started to hit the international markets, majority of the countries were getting the cropped 16:9 version. However, in America, Funimation actually fought for the 4:3 version, which is the non-cropped version. Not only did they do it for the Blu-rays, but they also did it for the DVDs. So I want to get that all out of the way because I just want to talk about the most current thing that's happening, which is the Buu arc of Kai. Since April of this year, Dragon Ball Kai returned with the Buu arc, and it returned on television in 16:9, which wasn't surprising. However, we found out a few months after the fact that the home releases were also, for both the Blu-rays and the DVDs, would just be in 16:9. And this was very weird and very annoying because now there's a big inconsistency in the releases. It just didn't make sense why they did it. However, I will say that for the 16:9 version, they did actually extend the sides. So it's not like they didn't do anything. There's actually more footage in it, but regardless, there shouldn't be cropping because the Buu arc is meant to be a continuation. And now you have this weird thing where you have the first half that's not cropped, and now you have a second half that is cropped. Now, the Buu arc of Kai has been hitting the international market, and it's under a different title known as Dragon Ball Z Kai The Final Chapters. And it's only been airing so far in Korea and in France. And on both of those stations, it's also been in 16:9. And interestingly enough, the Japanese version of Kai and the international version of Kai are not the same. They're a little different. The Japanese version is actually a little censored, while ours is not. They also cut out a little bit more filler because I believe they're trying to get Kai done within a year in Japan. So instead of using the footage they already have, they're trying to just wrap it all up. So with this in mind, you might be thinking, alright, well there's a lot of evidence, especially with the Blu-rays in Japan, that it's only 16:9. With that in mind, why do I think there is a possibility that there is a 4:3 version? Well, here's my evidence. On the Dragon Ball website, Kanzenshu, one of the administrators on his Twitter bought the Blu-ray version of the Buu arc of Kai in Japan, and as he was looking through the main menu, he posted this on his Twitter. I feel like Toei is just teasing fans by adding 4:3 shots to the main Buu Blu-ray menu. For shame. Now, I think what's interesting about this is not only did they use 4:3 images for the main menu, but as I looked at the pictures, the coloring on them looks just like Kai. And I bring that up because the remastering on the Buu arc, I would say, is not as good as the first half. They decided to add like a green tint to the series, and I'm not sure why, because it just doesn't look all that great. It doesn't look horrible, but it just doesn't look all that great. But my overall point is, when you look at these screenshots, they look very similar to like the Buu arc of Kai. And I bring that up because these are indeed 4x3 shots. I took the Gohan picture on the very left and I compared it to the actual cropped one in the show, and they're not the same. There is more picture on the top and on the bottom. Now, I do think it's weird because this is a menu for the Buu arc. Why would they need to put on 4x3 shots for a Blu-ray that everyone knows that's just 16:9? Well, maybe it's because there is a 4x3 version and they just aren't using it. I do believe a 4x3 version does exist, but maybe just for America. And here's why. The Buu arc of Kai originally was not going to air in Japan. As stated by previous evidence, especially by voice actors, it wasn't going to be in Japan at all. It was just being made for the international market. And that means a lot of companies are putting money into this for it to happen. And apparently, according to many sources, including Kanzenshuu, Funimation has the deepest pockets. Now, everyone else is probably telling Toei, hey, we want more Kai, and we're willing to foot the bill for it. And while Toei's saying yes, I guarantee you everyone else is saying we want it in widescreen. Because that's what the previous versions were for them. Everyone else had it in widescreen. But Funimation didn't. So it's very possible that Funimation said, hey, we want it in 4x3, and we're probably willing to pay you a little bit more for that. Are you okay with that? And I think they would do that because Funimation likes consistency within their own releases. You know, they don't really, I honestly believe Funimation has enough respect for the consumers to not screw with them like that, because I think they understand that Kai fandom wants things correct. And not only that, but Funimation considers Kai a hardcore product. So, now of course the counter argument to this is, well, why, if there's a 4x3 version that exists, why is it not out in Japan? Why is it not out in the home releases? What they get in Japan for the home releases is what we get for us. And that is a valid point. But there's something that people need to keep in mind. One, as I said earlier, there are two different versions. And that's important because the international version is not coming out in Japan at all. And with that in mind, there's actually some differences. Like, some of the pictures have been a little brightened and sharpened on the Japanese version compared to ours. The Japanese version is actually a little more censored, as I said before. There was an actual shot when Majin Buu killed Babidi. You actually, in the Japanese version, his head was, the blood was purple, while in the international version, his blood was red. And with that in mind, it's really possible that when they changed it, and they knew it had to air on television in 16:9, they probably said, we're not going to re-edit a 4x3 version again in order to have it air on television. That's more work, and a lot of work for them. And not only that, but for Toei, Kai doesn't make a good return in Japan. It's just Dragon Ball Kai does not do well in Japan for some reason. And I honestly believe it's just because it's an old story. Some people say it's because old animation, but I don't buy that. I think in the end, people in Japan just want new content, and that's it. And there's two reasons why I believe that. One, they released these Blu-rays with 12 episodes a pop. Whereas in the first half, they released them with like 6 episodes. And, you know, that's a pretty big difference in how you market your product. And not only that, but it did not make the first box set that came out sold really badly. It only sold like 300 something. It didn't do well. And I think Toei knows that it wasn't going to make a good return because they didn't plan on releasing in Japan. This was going to be a big international thing, not a, here's something for Japan. It was more of an afterthought because Kai only aired in Japan because Toriko flopped. They weren't going to bring it back, but they had to. So with that in mind, I do think there is a possibility that a 4x3 version exists, but it's only under Funimation, and I think until Funimation announces their version, we won't know. It seems that at this point, they're kind of dead last, because originally, according to the Japanese voice actor Vegeta, America was supposed to get Kai first, but it just didn't happen. And I think that's because, you know, they changed it since Kai was now going to air in Japan. But it's weird that South Korea and France are airing it before we are. And there has to be a reason for that. Now, some people say reverse importation, but that can't be a cause anymore because the Japanese version of Kai is not the international version of Kai. Others will say that the Funimation version airs in other countries, but even that doesn't seem like a good excuse. So hopefully there will be a 4x3 version. However, I will say that what I'm saying right now is still just a theory. You know, there's a 95% chance that it is just in widescreen, and we just have to deal with it because they may just produced it in widescreen, and that's all we can say, and that's it. You know, there's nothing we can do about it. And you know, Toei's been kind of cheap with the Buu arc of Kai. You know, there's a lot of evidence showing that the fact that they're not cutting out as much filler as they should be, etc., etc., etc. But we'll see. We'll find out when Funimation gives their announcements. But I just wanted to talk about this because I just think it's interesting that a Blu-ray menu used 4:3 footage instead of the already cropped 16:9 footage for the same show. And that's my thoughts on this topic, and I will catch you all next time.